The moon hung heavy over the Persian palace, its silver light spilling across the gardens like liquid silk. Inside the grand chambers of General Darius, a single oil lamp burned low, casting flickering shadows across the golden walls. One shadow, however, moved against the light's will. Prince Cyrus, cursed and stripped of his form, drifted silently through the corridors of the palace. Once a man of great power and charm, he now existed as little more than a whisper of darkness. Bound to the shadow realm, he wandered, waiting for the right moment to exact his revenge on the man who had condemned him. Tonight his patience bore fruit. In a quiet chamber, Parisa sat by the window, her gaze lost in the garden below. Her silk gown shimmered faintly, but her beauty did little to mask the loneliness etched into her features. She was the wife of Darius, a man feared and respected across the empire, but to her he was a master, not a husband. Parisa's fingers absently traced the intricate patterns of the golden bracelet encircling her wrist. A gift from Darius, a symbol of his claim over her. She sighed deeply, her voice barely a whisper. Is this all life will ever be? The flame of her lamp flickered, dimming briefly before steadying once more. She looked up, startled. The room grew colder and a soft, velvety voice broke the silence. Lonely heart, why do you weep? Parisa gasped, her eyes darting around the room. The voice was close, yet no one was there. Then she saw it, a shadow darker than the night, shifting against the wall. It stretched and twisted until the faint outline of a man's face appeared. Who's there? Parisa's voice trembled, though curiosity tempered her fear. I am Cyrus, the shadow replied. His voice was smooth, hypnotic. The rightful prince of this empire, cast into darkness by your husband's treachery. My husband? Parisa's brow furrowed. Darius did this to you? The shadow shifted as if in pain. He feared my power, my rightful claim to the throne. He struck a bargain with a sorcerer to rid himself of me. Now I am neither man nor spirit, just this shadow cursed to linger in the darkness. Parisa's breath hitched. Darius was ruthless, but she had never imagined him capable of such treachery. Yet the thought of her husband's cruelty stirred little surprise in her heart. Why have you come to me? She asked, her voice steadying. The shadow leaned closer, its form shimmering faintly like smoke. Because you are the key to my freedom. Your husband trusts you. You are close to him in ways no one else can be. With your help, I can break this curse and reclaim what is mine. Parisa hesitated. What do you want me to do? The shadow prince's tone softened, weaving a thread of seduction into his words. Learn his secrets. Find out where he keeps the amulet that binds me to this form. Bring it to me and I will be free. Parisa's mind raced. Darius had taken everything from her, her freedom, her dreams. And now here was a man who promised her a chance at power. Yet a flicker of doubt remained. What happens to Darius? She asked. The shadow's edges wavered, almost as if smiling. He will face the consequences of his actions. Nothing more. Parisa looked into the shadow's faint outline of a face. In its depths she saw not just darkness, but a longing that mirrored her own. Slowly she extended her hand toward him. If I do this, what do I get in return? The shadow prince's voice was barely more than a whisper. Freedom. Power. A life where you are no one's possession. Their hands, or rather her hand and his shadowy form, touched. A strange warmth spread through her palm, and the golden bracelet on her wrist seemed to dim. Then it's a deal, Parisa said, her voice firm. The shadow lingered for a moment as if savoring the moment, before slipping away into the darkness. Parisa watched him go, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear, excitement, and something she couldn't quite name. As the moonlight poured through her window, she realized she had taken the first step down a path she could not turn back from. A path that promised power, but at what cost? The days that followed felt like a waking dream for Parisa. By day she played the obedient wife, exchanging formalities with Darius as he plotted his endless conquests. But by night her chambers became a haven of whispers and shadows. Prince Cyrus visited her often, his presence a flicker of darkness that never fully revealed itself. He spoke of plans, of secrets, and of the amulet that held his curse. Slowly, Parisa began to piece together her husband's schemes. Hidden vaults, secret chambers, and forbidden relics. Yet with every passing night her resolve wavered. Cyrus was no ordinary shadow. His voice was silk and fire, wrapping around her like an embrace. When he spoke of the life they could share once his curse was broken, her heart beat faster. Yet doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. Could she trust a man who existed in darkness? One evening, as the palace grew quiet, Parisa slipped into Darius's private study. She moved quickly, her steps light as she scanned the room. Cyrus had told her what to look for: a bronze chest engraved with ancient runes. It was said to hold the amulet that bound him to the shadow realm. Her fingers brushed the latch when the sound of footsteps made her freeze. Parisa ducked behind a tapestry as Darius entered the room, flanked by two advisors. "The Shadow Prince grows bolder," Darius said, his voice heavy with disdain. "He dares to linger near the palace. I want double the guards at every entrance. And if anyone so much as whispers his name, I want them silenced." Parisa held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "But General," one advisor ventured, "if he breaks the curse." "He won't," Darius snapped. "The amulet is safe. No one can touch it without my command." The men continued their conversation, but Parisa's thoughts were racing. If Darius's claim was true, then finding the amulet wasn't enough. She needed a way to bypass the magic that guarded it. When the room was empty again, she emerged from her hiding place. That night she shared her findings with Cyrus. "I can't touch the amulet," she said, her voice trembling. "Darius has bound it to his will." Cyrus's shadow flickered as though restless. "There is a way," he said. "If you wear his trust like a mask, he will reveal the secret to you." "And what then?" Parisa asked. "What happens to me if he discovers I betrayed him?" The shadow leaned closer, his voice a dark caress. "You will not be alone. Once I am free, no one, not Darius, not the Empire, will ever harm you again." Parisa wanted to believe him, yet a cold knot of fear coiled in her stomach. A week later, the palace buzzed with activity. Darius had summoned his generals and nobles for a grand feast. Parisa, ever the dutiful wife, sat silently at his side, her golden gown shimmering under the lamplight. Her eyes, however, were fixed on the heavy chain around Darius's neck. At the end of it, hidden beneath his robes, was the key to the vault where the amulet lay. Parisa's mind raced as she watched him drink. He laughed, boasting of his victories, his grip on power, and the enemies who dared to challenge him. She forced a smile, feigning interest as she reached for the pitcher to refill his cup. "My lord," she said softly, "you have built an empire that will be remembered for ages. How do you guard such treasures? Surely there are those who would seek to take what is yours." Darius smirked, his pride swelling under her praise. "Let them try. None can touch what I guard. The amulet, for instance, its magic is bound to me alone. Only my bloodline can unlock its power." "Your brilliance knows no bounds," Parisa said, lowering her gaze to hide the glimmer of triumph in her eyes. Late that night, after the feast had ended, she crept into Darius's chambers while he slept. Her hands shook as she reached for the chain around his neck, careful not to wake him. The key felt cold in her palm as she slipped away, her heart pounding with every step. When she reached the vault, Cyrus was waiting, his shadow stretching across the stone floor. "You have done well," he murmured, his voice full of anticipation. "The moment is near." Parisa hesitated, the key trembling in her hand. "Once you're free, what happens to him?" "To Darius?" The Shadow Prince's form rippled. "He will face the fate he deserves. But you, Parisa, you will stand by my side as I take back what is mine." She turned the key, the lock clicking open with a sound that seemed to echo through the halls. Inside the vault, the amulet lay on a pedestal, its surface glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Cyrus's shadow surged forward, stopping just short of the amulet. "Bring it to me," he said, his voice trembling with urgency. Parisa reached out, her fingers brushing the cool metal. A surge of power coursed through her, making her gasp. For a brief moment she felt invincible, stronger, freer than she had ever been. But then images flashed before her eyes. She saw Cyrus not as the charming Shadow Prince, but as a conqueror bathed in fire and darkness. She saw herself at his side not as a partner but as a pawn. And she saw Darius broken and defeated, but not without his own moments of kindness. The times he had protected her, however cruel his love may have been. "Parisa," Cyrus urged, his voice sharp. "Do not hesitate." She turned to face the Shadow Prince, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. What are you hiding from me, Cyrus? What will you do once you have this? The shadow's edges wavered, his tone growing colder. You question me now after all we have done? The amulet pulsed in her hand, its light growing brighter. Parisa realized she held the power to decide not just Cyrus's fate, but her own. Her breath caught as the weight of her choices bore down on her. The vault pulsed with an unnatural energy, the amulet in Parisa's trembling hand casting sharp shadows across the stone walls. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest. She looked at Cyrus, his shadow flickering impatiently like a storm cloud. Parisa, Cyrus's voice turned sharp, tinged with desperation. You know what he's done to you. To me. To everyone who stands in his way. Give me the amulet and together we will end his tyranny. But what comes after, Cyrus? Parisa asked, her voice trembling. You talk of freedom, but I've seen what lies in your heart. You want power just as much as he does. The Shadow Prince stilled. For the first time his flickering form became unnervingly quiet. You think I seduced you for this moment, he said, his voice soft and laced with an edge of hurt. You think I lied about everything? Parisa stepped back, her fingers tightening around the glowing amulet. Didn't you? The silence that followed was deafening. Cyrus's form wavered, and for the briefest moment he appeared almost human. A man scarred by centuries of loss and vengeance. I told you only part of the truth, he admitted. Yes, I crave power, but only to reclaim what was stolen from me. Darius cursed me, Parisa. He didn't just take my body, he took my kingdom, my people, my name. Would you not fight to reclaim your own soul if it were ripped from you? His words struck a chord deep within her. Parisa knew what it was to feel powerless, trapped in a life not of her choosing. And yet something about Cyrus's plea felt hollow. He was not the man she thought he was. Nor was Darius. She stepped further away, her mind racing. I have to know. Once you have the amulet, once you're free, what happens to me? To this kingdom? The shadow hesitated. You already know, she whispered, her voice breaking. Cyrus surged toward her, his shadowed form looming. Don't throw this away, Parisa. If you side with Darius, you will remain nothing but his pawn. With me you will be a queen. Choose wisely. Behind her, a sudden noise shattered the tense moment. The heavy oak doors of the vault slammed open and Darius stormed in, sword in hand. His eyes burned with rage, his voice echoing through the chamber. Parisa, he bellowed. Step away from him. Cyrus retreated slightly, his shadow flickering against the far wall. So you found her, Cyrus sneered. Did you expect her to remain loyal to you after all you've done to her? After all the chains you've wrapped around her spirit? Darius ignored the taunts, his gaze fixed on Parisa. He's manipulating you, he said, his voice softer now. Whatever promises he's made, they are lies. And what about your promises? Parisa shot back, her voice cracking with emotion. You swore to protect me, to cherish me, and yet all I've been to you is a pawn in your games of war. Darius faltered, his grip on the sword loosening. Parisa, I never wanted this life for you. But I couldn't risk losing you. Not to him. The tension between the three of them crackled like fire. Parisa felt torn, standing at the center of two forces that had shaped her life in ways she could no longer ignore. Then a thought struck her. What if neither of you should have this, she murmured, looking down at the glowing amulet in her hands. Both men, or what was left of them, stiffened. Parisa, no, Cyrus warned. You don't understand the power you hold. Darius's voice followed, panicked. You'll doom us all if you destroy it. But Parisa was no longer listening. For too long she had been caught between the wills of others, a pawn in their battles for power. Now she held the power and she would use it to decide her own fate. With a cry that echoed through the vault, Parisa raised the amulet above her head. It pulsed with an intense light, almost blinding her, but she held steady. Her voice rang out, filled with newfound strength. I am no one's pawn. Not anymore. She slammed the amulet to the ground, shattering it into countless shards. The world seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a deafening roar filled the chamber as Cyrus's shadow form unraveled, his scream a mixture of rage and sorrow. The darkness surged wildly before dissipating into nothingness, leaving behind only the faintest echo of his presence. Darius staggered, his sword clattering to the ground. The glow of the amulet's magic faded, and the air grew still once more. Parisa stood at the center of the chaos, breathing heavily. Her hands trembled, but her gaze was steady as she turned to face Darius. "You can no longer control me," she said, her voice firm. "If you want me to stay, it will be because I choose to. Not because you force me to." Darius nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You have my word," he said quietly. In the weeks that followed, the palace began to change. Parisa found herself stepping into a new role, not as the subservient wife of a general, but as a voice of reason and compassion within a kingdom long ruled by war and fear. Darius, true to his word, began to relinquish some of his control, allowing her to shape a future where power was not the only currency. As for Cyrus, his shadow lingered only in her memories, a bittersweet reminder of the choices she had made and the strength she had found. Though his form was gone, the lessons he had taught her remained. True strength comes from breaking free of manipulation and choosing your own path, even when caught between forces of deception and control. Only by reclaiming your autonomy can you rise above being a pawn in others' games and shape your own destiny. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful or persuasive others may seem, the greatest power lies within the choices you make for yourself. She was no longer a pawn in anyone's game. She was her own queen.